Hello, everybody. This is Amber Hines. I'm one of the lead organizers of WordPress Accessibility Day. And I am very excited to have with me here Mark Miller from TPGI. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you so much for having me on this. I really appreciate it.
We are excited to have you here for a pre-event live stream. I am actually literally going on Twitter right now so that I can retweet this out and say, hey, everybody, join us in. So we are going to have the opportunity to chat. It looks like Michelle said hi in the chat. If anyone is watching and you are interested in learning more about TPGI or have any questions, I'm happy to pass them along to Mark. But Mark, can you give us a quick introduction for yourself and what TPGI does?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Amber. Really appreciate what you guys are doing here and appreciate the opportunity. I'm Mark Miller. I've been in digital accessibility for over a decade now. I'm the sales director for TPGI. TPGI started back in 2002 with somebody who many people may recognize the name of, Mike Paciello, who is still very active in the world of accessibility today. In 2017, TPGI was bought by a company called Vispero. Vispero's has several companies underneath the Vispero umbrella, and people may recognize Freedom Scientific that creates JAWS, which is the world's leading screen reader. At that time, they acquired a company called Always Accessible, which is where our ARC platform really came from. Our ARC platform is our digital accessibility monitoring platform, which we'll get into, I'm sure, as time goes on here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2018, that's when I came on board. I was with an organization, a company called Interactive Accessibility, led by or owned by a woman named Kathy Walbin, who was very well known in the industry at the time. And we joined forces with TPGI in 2018. 2021, we had a rebrand. That's why the I, if you look at TPG, that's the Paciello group, and that little I, that's me. That's Interactive Accessibility. And then we've been innovating, improving the ARC platform. We're rolling out something called TAS, which stands for TPGI as a service. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we actually have a guarantee of accessibility that we're bringing in with that. So we've got all sorts of fun stuff going on. But that's in a nutshell who I am. The other thing about me that some people may know is I'm really involved in the W3C working group for maturity. So my passion is around helping organizations mature their capabilities for accessibility.
Well, that is fabulous. We are so excited to have you here today and to have TPGI, of course, as one of our sponsors for WordPress Accessibility Day. I always think it's interesting to hear how companies come together, and I'm sure you all had many discussions about how you were going to create a logo and a brand name of multiple companies. I cannot even imagine what that was like in the room.
Yeah,
Kind of fun, probably.
Well, and back in the early 2000s, it was just ideas. It was almost not even companies. There wasn't a ton of money to be made. The internet was just starting to become a place of public accommodation, where the average public used it as part of their workday or to do things like bank or purchase. So all these little companies started up back then, and the evolution, what is that, 2.5 decades later, is just unbelievable.
Yeah. I've actually always kind of liked your logo because it's got the capital TPG and the lowercase I, which to me kind of feels like a person. I don't know if that was the intent, but that's how I see the logo. And like it's a round dot, not a square dot for anyone who hasn't seen it before. And it just it looks friendly to me. And there's like a doorway there. I don't know.
Yeah, we try to be friendly. That's true. And yeah, that is kind of the idea. It's kind of that, you never want to be overt about anything because something like accessibility is really a broad subject and there's a lot to it. But there is kind of exactly, that's the idea we wanted to give, is sort of this friendly open door. The I can be interpreted as a person for sure. And so good. I'm glad to hear you say that. It means that we kind of did our job there, right?
It's working.
Yeah, it's working.
Cool. So, I'm curious if you could tell everyone a little bit more about the ARC platform that you
Sure.
mentioned, which is a tool for measuring and monitoring accessibility. Is that a good
Yeah,
broad description?
that's a great, perfect one-liner for it. It stands for Accessibility Resource Center. At its heart, it monitors and manages accessibility. So there's a robust scanning and monitoring capability to it. It's sort of built on this premise of discover, solve, and manage, right? And what that means is exactly what it sounds like, but you really have to discover what your issues are when it comes to digital accessibility. That's the first step: is what does this look like? What are the things that we have to worry about, right? And try to solve. And then the second part is to actually solve that. And that is where actual information comes in. Like, here's an issue, here's something that's not working for a person with a disability. What do we do with that programmatically or whatever the case is? And then the last piece of it, manage, this probably really takes all of that and wraps it up into a very important bow. And that is, how does an organization approach this and do this in a way that's sustainable and efficient over time? So ARC, kind of in that order, thinks about those three things: discover, solve, and manage. And the discover piece of that is, a lot of people are probably familiar with traditional scanning tools that go in and
Mhm.
use a rule set, and they can't catch 100% of the failures to the guidelines, but they can catch quite a few. And it's a great way to get an initial idea of where you might stand from an accessibility standpoint. And it's a great way to uncover some low hanging fruit in terms of things that you can fix. And
So things like empty buttons, images without alt text, links that are only icons and don't have any meaningful text for a screen reader. Those are all examples.
those are perfect examples. I think the alternative text is a great example because it's something that a tool can do very well. It can say, you've got an image, uh, you have an image element here, and it doesn't have what's called an alt attribute, right? It doesn't have an attribute in it that provides alternative text for somebody who may not be able to perceive what is in that image. Where you sort of step into a manual world is deciding what that text should be is not something a tool can do. Any tool can do. It can't say, like, I read your alternative text and it's perfect. You need a human being to look at that and say, yeah, that's the purpose of this image, and the text reflects it properly. But that initial, hey, we're not even doing this, right? We don't even have alternative text, is there. And so the platform does that. Looking at that over time is important too. So it's not just like a one-time thing where you go, oh, look at all these things, let's try to fix them. It's monitoring, because typically digital assets are dynamic. People are changing them. So you can continue to introduce, just like you would any bug. It's, issues for accessibility are really bugs that affect people with disabilities, right? Is
Mhm.
one way to think about it. So you are always introducing and trying to discover and solve bugs. It's the same with accessibility. Um, so we have a very robust, what's called knowledge center, and it does two major things that help people out. One, it's got an entire educational element to it. So if you're just, I don't understand the subject, I'm new to it, need a refresher, it's sort of that classroom experience. And then the second thing is the knowledge base itself, which is the library, right? And the tool dynamically links to both of those things. So it says, we found an image that doesn't have alternative text. Here's all the articles and classroom experiences on the best practices for fixing or creating alternative text for an image. So that's the solve piece of it, right? And then the final piece of it is making all the data, kind of the boring stats and everything, available to the organization as a whole, so that, like, leadership can make sure accessibility programs are progressing the way that they need to, and all of that. So I'm going to stop there because I can keep going and get even more boring if I keep going. So
Oh, it's not boring. I also work in this space where I'm like constantly trying to figure out how to measure accessibility and what numbers and to
right.
look at and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's really interesting. And your resource library, is that specifically just in ARC, or are you also referencing? I know you all have a really fabulous blog, which we frequently share
Mhm.
articles from. Is that in addition to what's within ARC?
So that is in addition to what's within ARC. knowledge base is something very specific, and we have a whole team of people that work on it. In fact, you may know Ricky Osman, who's a
Yes,
friend.
he is one of our lead organizers for the event this year. He's actually our APAC team lead, and I'll have to say we are so excited to have him on board
Yeah,
because those of us in the US hours are going to get to sleep more this year.
yeah, because he's managing that. He's managing that overnight live stream that services the event. That's
Yes.
absolutely right. So he's on. He's a content writer on the knowledge base team. So the knowledge base is very. When I say library, like the one way I always think about this is like, if you want to become a lawyer, right? You've got to go and take all these classes and learn everything that you need to learn to pass the bar. Once you pass the bar and you start practicing law, you still need a really good law library, right? To reference the technical details and information of the law, right? Accessibility is the same way. Just because you know how to code for accessibility doesn't mean that you don't need to look something up every once in a while. So that knowledge base that they curate is what I call a hard knowledge base. In other words, we come up with a technique to solve a new problem. And then that's stress tested within the organization. And we're the perfect crucible to do that, right? Because all we do is look at, audit, look at people's website, help them with their accessibility all day, every day. And we see multiple different scenarios because of that. So we can stress test that new technique. And once all of the everybody in TPGI, the engineers in TPGI have kind of stress tested that, it goes into the knowledge base. So we actually use the knowledge base ourselves. It's our repository for the best way to solve digital accessibility problems. And then when those techniques, when we're really certain as an organization that we've got the right thing, that's when it rolls up to the knowledge base that's available to all of our customers within the ARC platform. And it is the most robust knowledge base out there, because everything we said before, we've been doing this for years, and we've just pulled together so many experts over the years that are involved in the W3C and in other, like yourself, just in other aspects of accessibility. And it's an ever evolving knowledge base. And it's really probably the most important thing, right? You can find tools out there that'll uncover issues. It's that rich content. It's that knowledge to really understand the current best practices for resolving it.
That's fabulous. I mean, I really feel like, finding issues is one thing, but knowing how to fix them is another. And the fact that you all provide that information in the ARC platform is, I'm sure, invaluable to all
Yeah,
of your customers.
it is.
I am curious, are there certain organizations that ARC is especially helpful for, or certain types of websites?
Yeah, the sort of the real answer to that is anybody that needs to focus on accessibility as an organization, digital accessibility, right? That has some sort of a digital property, right? Whether it be a public facing website, it could be something internal, right? That's facing employees. It could be a web-based application, right? Anything that's sitting out there in a browser that people are using to find information, get things done, which really covers a lot of folks. It probably fits in that mid-sized to enterprise level organization. I mean, we have global organizations that use it, and we have, you know, that pet supply specialty e-commerce site that uses it. It's really a wide range, and it's accessible from a cost standpoint to that group of people. But the need, Amber, would be like we want some level of accessibility program. And I talk
Mhm.
about maturity. It's one of those things, and I'll give a brief description of maturity here, just so I'm not using the term and assuming everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. But when we think about maturity in an organization, we think about taking a capability like being able to produce an accessible digital asset website, whatever you want to think of it as, and improving our capability of doing that within the organization, getting better, more efficient at it. And when you think about something like the ARC platform, it can get you started, right? It can help you take those first steps, but then it also grows with the organization and helps lays the foundation for that maturity. So you have something to build on over time.
So there's probably an organizational size component to this too as well, like maybe not as many individual one team websites are using the platform as much as it's made really to support teams that are trying to grow in their accessibility strategy. Is that right?
Yeah. If you have your own website out there, your own blog, your own, if it's like that kind of a small thing, the ARC platform is probably a little more than what you need. We have ARC Toolkit,
Okay.
which is
And what's that?
so ARC Toolkit is a free companion to the ARC platform, right? They fully agree with each other. They exist in the same ecosystem, meaning that if the ARC Toolkit says you have an issue, the ARC platform is going to agree. So they're meant to work hand in hand. But a lot of people with a smaller, just individuals, my son is a developer and he makes his own personal websites and he uses ARC Toolkit on his personal websites, because as an individual, he's not going to go buy a art platform, and so it's a single page scanning tool. If you go to our website, tpgi.com, you can find it there. In it, it's browser agnostic at this point. It really works with all the major browsers, and it will tell you on a page. So you see a lot of developers use it because they're usually, I'm fixing this on a page. Did I fix it? That's ARC Toolkit. And it also has a lot of features that go beyond that scanning the page aspect. So for example, it will overlay the entire tabbing order of the page on the page. So if you're trying to make sure you have a logical tabbing order, and for those of you listening that may not know what I mean by that, it's literally when you hit the tab key, normally you start up somewhere around like maybe the logo of the company, right? Like TPGI in the corner is where you start. And then you hit the tab key and you go into the nav, and so forth, right? And one of the important things for accessibility is that happens in a logical order. If you're tabbing and that focus indicator that tells you where you are all of a sudden disappears because it jumped all the way
Jumps
to
all
the footer,
around.
that's a problem for accessibility for a lot of reasons. And we can wait to see if we really want to get into there. But this overlays the tabbing order. So it literally draws a line on the page.
And numbers like one,
And
two,
numbers it.
3, 4. So you can see where it went in what
So
exact
you can
order.
see
It's kind of
where it
like
went.
connect
So
the dots on the top of your website.
it's like exactly, it's connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
But and the nice thing about, and it'll overlay heading structure, it'll overlay a lot of things, but that is not telling you what's wrong, but that's providing you with some great tools that if you do know what you're looking for, right? If you do understand tabbing order is important, now you can look to see what the tabbing order looks like. And if you're fixing the tabbing order, instead of having to do what we call brute force tabs, so imagine your 20 tabs, you fix tab number 20. Who wants to sit there and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 20? You can just look. So
You just turned on.
you just turn it on and look. So if you have any curiosity at all, I'd go check it out. It's really a cool tool, and we get a lot of compliments on that tool. But that's a companion to the ARC platform, and that is what probably the smaller organizations are at least starting with. And a lot of those people grow into the platform one day. But
That's neat. I have not seen that tool, so I'll have to check it out. The one that I like that you all have is your color contrast analyzer, which is not built into browser. It's a desktop application. And I find this really handy when sometimes we do design reviews and people send us a Figma file, but they haven't given us developer level access to the Figma file. So I can't actually inspect and get the color code. So I pull up your color contrast analyzer and it has the eyedropper, and I can just sample the colors and say, does this pass contrast or not? So that is a tool that I have very much appreciated in my work life.
Yeah, we have a lot of people mention the color contrast tool for that reason. And I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's a desktop app, so it's not bound into a browser, which means you could be using a native application, you could be using something
like
in the browser.
Microsoft Word.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, you can go in and use the color contrast analyzer, and we've had that around for a long time. And you're exactly right. It has a foreground background color picker, so it's kind of a point and shoot sort of thing. Like you don't have to you don't have to do a lot of complicated things. You just point at the two things that you want to compare, and it compares it for you, and it conforms with the latest WCAG guidelines all the way up to from A to AAA. And one of the cool things, my father's colorblind. He's actually here visiting. He's
Mm-hmm.
in that other room. And so it has a colorblind simulator in it, which I think is really important so that people understand where, elements may disappear for somebody who's colorblind because of the color choices. And then it's got support for like alpha transparencies. So if you're working with those different transparencies and stuff like that, it's good. And we find a lot of people use it inside of Figma. And that's a nice thing. Like there's Figma tools and stuff out there, but this one sort of, you use it in Figma, but you can also run off and use it in anything that you want.
Anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also find it handy when you're trying to test the color contrast of text with an overlay that is over an image. And you're like trying to sample like the lightest part of the image,
Right.
which is like in this tiny little corner, and the
Yeah.
text, right? It's super handy. So
Yeah.
very much appreciate that you all put that tool and maintain it for
And
us.
that one's free too.
It is free.
Toolkit and color contrast analyzer are free. So if you pop over to our website, you can get links into both of those tools.
Yeah. So you all at TPGI have been a sponsor of WordPress Accessibility Day for a couple of years now. And of course, one of your content writers is on our organizing team this year, which, as we mentioned before, we are all so grateful for him. I'm looking forward to getting more than 2 hours of sleep this year.
Yep.
Although it will be hard. Like, I really like to just watch even when I'm not running the stream because there's so many great conversations that happen both in the chat and with the presentations. But I'm curious, what is the motivating factor for you all in supporting WordPress Accessibility Day and all of these great free tools and your webinars that you run and your resources? Why do you think that supporting this kind of education is important?
Yeah. Well, there's a few reasons why we support this particular event. And, the big answer is that accessibility is important. It's not always top of mind for everyone, and it probably, in our view, it should be. It should be something that everybody's thinking about. WordPress is one of the most widely used CMSs in the world, so we of course want to work with an organization so that teams who are using organization like this, an event like this, so that teams who are using WordPress understand, that you should be thinking about accessibility. Accessibility means that everyone can use your product, your platform, your website, regardless of ability, right? You're really eliminating those barriers, and that's super important to us. And this organization in particular is very focused on that level of evangelization, right? I don't see you guys as just sort of another quick event out there. You really put a lot of thought, and you're very, very generous to the people who speak, because it's important to you, and it's important to you to have good speakers and all that kind of thing. So from that standpoint, we like to support this event and ones like it, so that we're doing our part to help spread that word. Also, we've mentioned Ricky Osmond a few times, and that's another important reason. Like when we have employees who are passionate and they go out and they spend Ricky works hard all day, right? It's not like he's sitting around looking for something to do, but he is so passionate about this that he is out, running your overnight stream so that more and more people can enjoy this. And so it's easier for you all to do it. So it's more sustainable and all that kind of stuff. So, we really want to support our employees who are out there supporting things like this as well. So, it's in no small part because Ricky thought it was important. We think it's important, and we want to.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
To support your team that way. And I will call back just a little bit to what you were saying about us supporting our speakers. Many people might not know this because it is unique in the WordPress community, but we do pay our speakers for their speaking time. In no small part, thanks to the generosity of our sponsors making that possible for us, because of course we are a nonprofit organization. But our average speakers are paid $300 a session, and then our keynote has a little higher of an honorarium. We actually just published late last night a whole financial transparency page because we wanted
Oh,
to be
nice.
more clear about that.
Yeah.
And it has a link if anyone wants to go see the Google Sheet with our budget for 2024. It's got all our notes in it. We were debating. We're like, are these confusing? We're like, no, let's just we might remove them later if people are like, what are all these side notes? But yeah, we really do feel that it's very important that speakers are compensated for their expertise. I think it helps us get a really fabulous speakers who might not otherwise consider speaking for free. And then, of course, there's a lot of people with disabilities who are underpaid and not fairly compensated for their time or expected to speak or test things for free. And we really wanted to be able to say, no, people with disabilities need to have fair compensation as well.
Fantastic.
And this year, we have 25% of our speakers identify as having a disability. So
That is fantastic. And that is exactly what I was referring to. I just didn't think didn't know if it was my place to mention that you pay for your speakers, but that is one of the things, for all the reasons that you said, that really attracts us to this, is that it's, you're being fair, and you're bringing the best people in, through that. And I love that transparency. I was unaware of the transparency thing, but that's really great.
yeah, thank you.
Kudos to you all.
So speaking of speakers and looking
Mhm.
ahead to the event, I always like to tease out some of our sessions because I didn't say this at the beginning. I really ought to have, but the event is coming up very soon here, October
Mhm.
9th through 10th. And I'm curious, Mark, if you've had a chance to look at the schedule and if there's any sessions that you would want to call out.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, you've got Lainey Feingold, and who I have seen her speak at CSUN and at so many different places, and she is so knowledgeable. She is just such an absolute icon, and really incredibly responsible for a lot of advancements that we've made. So if you're familiar with Lainey Feingold, you're probably already looking forward to her session, so you don't need
Mhm.
me to tell you. If you're new, please go see Lainey Feingold. She's doing accessibility as a civil right, the digital accessibility legal landscape for the WordPress community. And Lainey Feingold is, she's a lawyer, she's legal counsel, and she's been in this space for a long time. In fact, she created something called structured negotiations, which is a way to have people with disabilities express that they need something more from an organization and work sort of civilly with that organization, and avoid the unpleasant trees of litigation. And I may have
Mhm.
butchered that. If I did, I am sorry, Lainey, but I hope that at least gets people close. I've actually read the book. She wrote a book called about it, that's
About structured
about
negotiation,
structured
right? Yeah.
negotiation, called, I think it's just called Structured Negotiation, if I remember right. And
Mhm.
that book is not only great on that, but it's an incredible history of the evolution of accessibility over the past probably a couple generations. So that
Yeah,
one.
one of the tiny things that I have always noted about her that I think is so interesting is she was on the team that helped ATMs to get
Yes.
headphone jacks.
Yeah, the
So it's
reason why
like
we
this
have.
little thing that we probably all see when you go,
Mhm.
and many of us just take totally for granted. But it's amazing that she was willing to come speak and be our keynote speaker. So I'm
And
very excited about that.
that is interesting. And if you've never noticed, there's a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack in every ATM in the world. And the
Mhm.
reason for that is that people who are blind will carry around headphones with that 3.5 millimeter jack and plug it in. And as soon as they plug that into the ATM, it knows that there's a person who's blind using it, and that's when the screen reader capability of the ATM kicks in. And
Mhm.
that's thanks to Laney. In fact, we produce JAWS, and we have a product called JAWS for Kiosk. So if you think of an ATM, it's an enclosed system, right? It's hardware, software, all bound together. It kind of stays together. And then generally speaking, people are using it outside of the home, right? So JAWS for
Mhm.
Kiosk will make anything talk. And as you know, kiosks are more and more important because we've got more self-service, um, purchasing, like e-commerce that's self-service. When you go to the airport now, you're putting out your baggage tags with kiosks. If you've applied for a job recently, you may have used a kiosk to do that at the place. So, in Jaws for kiosk, just tying this all back together. Sorry, I'm diverting a little bit, tying it back
That's all
together.
right.
Just for kiosk is one of the things. It's one of the many things it does is it automatically has that programming in it to understand that when somebody plugs in that 3.5 millimeter jack, that it should kick on and start talking to that person because it's a person who's blind. So that same thing that Laney brought to the ATM so many years ago is now carrying forward into a very kiosk heavy digital world that we live
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got one more. I've got another.
Yeah.
One I
What
want
else
to
are you
get
looking forward
to.
to
Yeah,
at
because
the event?
you have so many good sessions. I'm going to just boil it down to these two. And I had to mention Laney because I feel like a groupie, right? Like Laney's there. I want to try to
Oh,
get in.
me
Half
too.
the time you see someone, you couldn't even get in to see her. So you're like, oh, I got to stand out in the hallway. Hope I hear something. But the other one, and this one's a little bit closer personal to me, is navigating neurodiversity. And I'm looking at my notes here. That's creating websites with inclusivity in mind. And they're going to talk about how people who are neurodivergent. Neurodivergent is a broad term that means people who I'm gonna say it plainly, like think differently, and that could be people who are on the autistic spectrum, people who have ADD, ADHD, and people who have dyslexia. I myself have ADD and dyslexia. So, and I do a lot of research and do some speaking on it myself. So I'm always very interested in what people have to say. So that's it's an interesting space in digital accessibility because it's kind of that place where nobody knows what to do. It's a difficult one to solve for, largely because the needs around it are so diverse. If you simply look at something like dyslexia and something like autism, right? And we think of autism as being on a spectrum. Well, really, dyslexia is on that same spectrum. And so is somebody who's considered to be normative from a neuro standpoint. Dyslexia and autism are on opposite ends. So you've got dyslexia, you've got normative, and then on the other side of that, you have autism. So the way that people with dyslexia and the way that people with autism think are actually in some ways opposites of each other. And then within those groups, you're in a whole spectrum. So me as a person with dyslexia, what I need and what I struggle with may be different than a colleague of mine that has dyslexia, for example. So even within those particular groups, so it's always really interesting to hear people speak on it. It's probably the one that the guidelines have struggled with, the WCAG guidelines. The most is because if you can't, if you have a hearing impairment, you either can hear, can't hear, or somewhere in between where it's difficult to hear. And the accommodation is, well, if you have something where there's sound, have a written
Have
equivalent,
captions.
have captions, right? And maybe there's a few more things to think about than that, but it's the way to accommodate can be, I don't want to imply that anything's easy to accommodate for it, but it's more, it's more understandable. Same with people who are blind, right? You can see, you can't see, or you're low vision, somewhere in between. And so you need to hear what people can see, or you need to be able to greatly magnify, the accommodations are great. But with neurodivergence, it's just a very interesting subject to me, and it's just a hard one to solve. And I don't, even being neurodivergent myself, I don't have any answers for you. I think we're doing about as good as we can to keep people keep trying. So I'm always interested in what people have to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So everyone should definitely tune in for that talk if they want
Mhm.
to learn more about neurodivergence. And of course, we have 22 other fabulous talks that are going to be happening over the 24 hours of WordPress Accessibility Day. And I'll shout a little bit more out about that and registration in just a minute. But before I close, someone on the sponsors team told me that TPGI is giving away a 30-minute virtual seminar on the importance and impact of digital accessibility during WordPress Accessibility Day. So people can go to your sponsors page. They can enter for a chance to win this for their organization. Can you share more about that giveaway?
Yep. I can share more largely because I'm going to be the one doing it for you. So
Wonderful.
I have this we do this for large organizations to help them, organizations that the accessibility people in organizations are always trying to evangelize within their organization for accessibility. So what I mean by that is get more understanding, get more people on board with the effort, and understanding the importance for it. So I have a great colleague of mine, a woman named Corey Perlander, who is a young mother of two wonderful little girls. She's an incredible professional here at TPGI. She's a wife, and she's been slowly losing her vision since she was a young girl herself. And so she comes in and does this with me. And essentially what we do is we talk about the importance of accessibility from several different angles, the legal, the inclusivity aspect of it, just the business ROI of it. And then Corey really comes in and gives people a great understanding of how people who rely on things like screen magnifiers and screen readers interact with all these wonderful digital things that we have nowadays, and some of the challenges. And the great thing about that is that she can speak to it through her life experiences. So it's very impactful, and it's a great way to, if you're, I'm going to use the word fortunate, but if you're not fortunate enough to be exposed to people with disabilities, like you and I probably are, Amber, I know that it's been a great part of my life just to meet all these different people and see people who operate from a completely different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
This can be a great way to kind of gain that perspective. It's just incredibly enriching, and Corey's wonderful, so I love doing this with her.
Yeah. So, it really does. People often have asked me, how did the question you go on, like, how did you get into accessibility? What sold you on it? That kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I will say, I was working in accessibility for a few years as just a developer before I really made friends in the accessibility community and had the opportunity to see people use screen readers on my company's work.
It's
Right. And
eye-opening.
it really is
Yeah.
having that experience. So I think the fact that you all are giving away the opportunity for an organization to, and I'm assuming they can invite anyone from their team to this
Yeah.
virtual
More, the more
seminar.
the more the merrier. Yeah.
And to
And
get that experience is
we can
great.
play with the 30 minutes a little bit too. So, we can do a little bit more if that's what somebody wants. But yeah, and we love doing it because it's the same reason, Amber, why you're sitting here talking to me today, is because um, you feel like accessibility is so important. The WordPress community feels like accessibility is important, and just getting out there and talking about it is really probably one of the best things that we can all do. So if you want that for your organization, we'd love to come in and do that.
Yeah. So you can enter to win after you register to attend. Then you can go to TPGI's sponsor page. There's a form there that you can submit. And after the event ends, we'll send all that information over to TPGI and they'll randomly select a winner and contact you. So I want to give you a chance real quick too. Beyond your sponsor page, Mark, where's a good place that people can go to follow TPGI to learn more about what you're doing? For sure, share any social medias, your web address. Where should people
Absolutely.
go?
So before I do that, Amber, I actually want to flip the script on you.
Oh, okay.
Because I do a lot of podcasting
Mm-hmm.
myself, like I know you do, and I'm every once in a while I'm on this side of it where I'm being asked questions. But I want to first thank you for the opportunity again and being part of this. And you talk about the 22, I don't remember how it is, events that you guys have coming up, all the different sessions that you have coming up.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well, I was just saying there were 22 additional sessions.
22
So
additional sessions.
because WordPress
So
Accessibility Day is
24 total.
24 hours, and you called out two of them.
22 of them, 24. So there's 22 additional sessions. So what are you most excited for? What are you? I know you've been a professional a long time in this industry. What is it that's you're excited to see?
So I am so Probably my top three. The first one is there is a speaker from Africa who's going to be talking about accessibility laws in Africa. And I will
Oh,
tell
wow.
you, I know nothing about accessibility laws
Yeah.
in
Okay.
Africa.
I just have a third one I gotta write down now.
Yeah. So I know a ton about US, Canada, Europe,
Yeah,
UK, but nothing about Africa. So I'm really excited about that because,
that is,
being able to
yeah.
learn from somebody who lives in that region about what the laws are like in their um, country or continent,
Mhm.
I think will be great. Um, there is also a talk, and I should have been smart and had the schedule up in front of me before you asked me
I
this
have it.
question.
That's all right. Well, you didn't know I was gonna ask you this question.
There is a session about building more accessibility into larger teams and like that I think will be really applicable to a lot of WordPress plugin and product
Yeah.
companies, which I think is an area that in the past we had a lot more talks that were more specifically geared to people who create the websites. But a big personal interest of mine over the last like year and a half is really trying to advocate for the people who build the tools that people use to build their websites, learning more about accessibility and making those tools more accessible so that the end user, maybe who isn't a developer at all, can just pick plugins, add their content, and as long as they add their content in the right way, they'll get an accessible website without having to think about things we talked about earlier, like are the buttons empty or not? Have they even heard of that? Right.
Well, that's
Um,
super appropriate for WordPress, right? Because that's essentially,
I mean, WordPress websites are built with just so many different
mm,
pieces that come from all over the web. That's one of the things that's amazing about WordPress. But if all of those individual pieces are not accessible, then that can really cause a problem for the person who's building the website. So we have a session that is going to be very like product team focused.
mhm.
And I'm very excited about that this year. Um, I'm trying to think if there's
If anybody
anything
wants to do a
else.
little bit of homework before that session that you mentioned, the ATAG guidelines
Mhm.
are the guidelines that the W3C puts out, just like the WCAG accessibility guidelines that inform products that people can use to create with, and how those products should enable the people to add accessibility into those creations. So ATAG tag.
Yeah, so I pulled up so that specific one, agile accessibility, building inclusivity into the product
Oh, I see
roadmap
that with
from
Nash.
Nasha Kuma,
Yeah.
which is at 1700 UTC for me here in the US. That's noon Chicago on the 9th. But there are so many. I've had the third one that I wanted to call it is I've had a personal project along the same line of testing a lot of page builders.
Hmm.
And Scarlett Isabel at 2100 UTC or 4 p.m. in Chicago is giving a talk on is your page builder accessible?
Nice.
Actually accessible. And because I've been doing a lot of testing of them, I'm like you said, I'm super interested to tune in and see what someone else has found along the same lines. So I'm definitely going to be getting that. But
Oh, that's
to be
good.
real, I'm going to be having a hard time going to bed. I'm
Yeah.
just going to be watching as
That's the
many as I
thing, is like you're
possibly
like, oh, which sessions do you want to go to? Most of them.
can. Yes.
I should have just answered it that way. It'd have been quicker. All right, very cool. So you want to know how people can find out about us, right? I didn't forget about
Yes.
your question. I wanted to flip things around on you for a second. So our website is tpgi.com. You can go there. My email is mmiller for Mark Miller, mmiller@tpgi.com. Big theme here with the whole tpgi.com thing. Those are two great ways. We have a wonderful blog, my podcasts, other podcasts, and really we
And
have a,
what's your podcast called if we want to
so
look for it on Podcast Player?
yeah, so it's real people, real stories, and it's really, we just talk to different professionals in the industry, people with disabilities, people advocating for people with disabilities, real people with real stories, and it's been going on for a long time, so there's kind of a deep archive if you want to go through it. There's some just great people that I've grabbed there. And then we have Dave Salone. If anybody knows Dave Salone, he's our CTO, our Chief Technology Officer, and he's in charge of our UX practice here. He and I do one that we just started on LinkedIn Live, which is, I'm going to forget the name of it. They're going to kill me, but it's an accessibility update that we do once a month. So that's another one. And there may be other ones coming up too. And then we have 2 blogs. We have a business blog and we have a technical blog. So depending on kind of what you're looking for, there's tons and tons of information there. But those are the best ways to get a hold of us. Check out our website, and you can always email me. And if I'm not the person to help you, I will direct you. So mmiller@tpgi.com. And info@tpgi.com is our general info as well. But
Great.
you just heard me talk, right? So,
yeah. Well, it has been super fun getting to chat with you, Mark. And thank you again for sponsoring WordPress Accessibility Day. For everyone who has not registered yet, WordPress Accessibility Day is happening October 9th and 10th. It is 24 hours. You can register for free, 100% free. It takes place on Zoom. We're going to have live captions typed by human beings and American Sign Language interpretation. You have the option, yes, we'll do some applause. I'm going to shift my camera down a little bit, but our t-shirt for this year, it is kind of a nerdy dev joke, but it's got colon focus with a rectangle around it. And then below that, it says, it's a feature, not a bug, because how many of us have had to tell clients that that little outline they see when they click on something is not a mistake. It is an intentional accessibility feature. And so you can choose, if you want to make a donation, and you will get a t-shirt after the event as a thank you. Or you can register totally for free. So please go register. The website is 2024.wpaccessibility.day. Thanks so much, Mark, and we'll see everybody at the conference.
Thank you, Amber, and thank everybody who